Welcome, everyone. We're going to give everyone just a couple seconds to get in the room. All right. I think we're going to go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. My name is Allison Korn, and I'm the Assistant Dean for Experiential Education at UCLA School of Law. And I'd really like to welcome you all to the second session of this school year in our Teaching Justice webinar series. And today the topic is Teaching Justice Through Freedom Pedagogy. And our presenter today is Norrinda Hayat from Rutgers Law School.
And I'm Layla Halas. I'm the co-director of the Immigrant Rights Clinic at Tulane Law School. I'm also the Associate Provost for International Affairs at the university. And we're excited to welcome you to this session, which is part of the Teaching Justice webinar series, which is a project of CLEA's Best Practices Committee. We have been featuring for a few years now innovative faculty who are discussing new approaches to teaching justice in the classroom and often drawing on the wisdom of current social movements. We've had topics, kind of specific area topics like immigration, economic justice, criminal justice, racial justice, as well as lots of kind of cross-cutting issues. And we're really thrilled about our lineup this year. We have another session coming up this semester, as well as a couple in the spring. So please stay tuned to CLEA's Best Practices website, and that's where we post the recordings of all of these talks. And so we have them all collected from the past few years, and we'll be kind of posting and advertising how to register for all our upcoming sessions on all the usual listservs. So thanks so much.
And we do want to let you all know that this session will be recorded or is being recorded. And as Layla said, we will make it available on the CLEA website later on. We'll circulate that information and link after the session concludes within a few days. If you have a question during this session, we encourage you to use the chat function. Layla and I will be monitoring regularly. There will also be some time for Q&A at the conclusion of the presentation. We ask everyone to please mute their microphones, but if you are comfortable, you're welcome to keep your video on during the session. So with that, I'm very excited and grateful to pass the mic over to Norrinda.
Thank you. Thank you to CLEA for having me, but a special thanks to Layla and Allison for being really gracious hosts of this presentation. And I'm really humbled to share my thoughts on this topic and sit in this seat, this virtual seat, behind so many of our esteemed colleagues who've already presented in this really important series. So thank you so much for making time out to engage in this talk. I'm going to share my screen and share a PowerPoint presentation, but at any point, I know we're going to all three try to monitor the chat. If questions or thoughts come up, I'm happy to engage in the middle at any time. So the talk is really based on my reflections after the murders of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd in particular, and the co-authorship of the Rutgers faculty anti-racism statement, which I drafted with two of my colleagues, Brandon Paradise and Kristen Undersma. And the essay, which is of the same name as this talk, Freedom Pedagogy, which is now in the current edition of the Clinical Law Review, proposes a list of conceptual steps that clinical instructors could take to start to build an anti-racist pedagogy, including centering Blackness, mapping critical race theory onto their pedagogy, our traditional clinical pedagogy, citing to Black women, and aligning with Black folks organizing for the Afro future, where Black humanity is recognized and where Black Lives Matter is more than an aspirational proposition. So I acknowledge here and in the paper that these steps are partial, they're preliminary, they're contingent in the face of larger challenges, including our ability to imagine, but also our ability to build liberatory spaces within existing societal constraints and institutional constraints. But there, as here, I'm going to urge us to move forward, even in the face of those constraints, toward anti-racist pedagogy. And so first, I want to start, and this by raising again, like saying their names, that Breonna Taylor murderers have not been brought to justice, and given the system that we exist in, likely, there is no consequence coming for her murder. And also that George Floyd should still be alive today, right? That even the justice that we saw is no justice at all, that his daughter is still a fatherless child. And I offer this talk in their name and in their honor, and also the honor of all of those unarmed Black people who have been murdered at the hands of the state. And it's in that context that I feel like we can't continue to teach clinic in the way that we have. So I want to think about, just to set some context here, what freedom is. I did say I wasn't going to do anything like interactive, Layla and Allison, and I changed my mind because so I wanted, if we have time at the end, I want to share, if you all can participate in this poll. I'm going to give you a minute to just think about what freedom is to you. If you've done Poll Everywhere, which I'm sure we have now, having taught on Zoom for 2 years, just indulge me. And maybe Layla and Allison, one of you could put this in the chat, so I'll move on and people could continue to engage the poll, and we can, kind of reflect on it together at the end. So I want to go back to that, and I'd be interested to see what everyone has to say about what freedom is to them, and whether that aligns with what you think freedom looks like for your clients. And this is not just in the criminal context, right? Just what does freedom feel and look like to you? I've been thinking about this. Maggie Nelson writes that the meaning of freedom is not at all self-evident or shared. And so that's why I raised this at the top. Are we talking about positive freedom, anarchist freedom, as we saw on January 6th, Marxist freedom, abolitionist freedom, libertarian freedom, white settler freedom, decolonizing freedom, neoliberal freedom, Zapista freedom, spiritual freedom, and so on. And then Robin D.G. Kelly says freedom was the goal of our people we're trying to achieve. Free was a verb, an act, a wish, a militant demand. Free the land, free your mind, free South Africa, free Angola, free Angela, free Huey. And so I just want to have us pause and think about what type of freedom I've been pausing to think, like, what type of freedom I've been trying to achieve for my clients. And I teach, I should have said this, a housing clinic. So I'm not talking about freedom just in terms of the carceral state, right? Just freedom in your life. And so free as a noun, as in the freedmen, abolitionist type freedom, is not what I'm hoping to talk about in terms of the article or this talk. Or free as a verb in terms of rights-based freedom, that we could do something, right? You could go to court and try to get access to housing. I don't think of that as, as I've evolved, as really freedom. What I'm talking about, and what I hope you might focus on, is this kind of freedom as an adjective, as movement, as laughter, as art, as peace, as joy, as absence from fear, absence from thinking you might be killed in your sleep at night by the state, absence of self-doubt as you try to achieve in academia, all of it, no freedom, right? Freedom is elusive for Black people, for our clients, for your colleagues. And so I wonder and ask, and been wondering, as we were writing the statement, what role we were playing in making our students feel unfree, contributing to their lack of freedom, contributing to our colleagues of color's lack of freedom, contributing to our clients' lack of freedom, even as we thought we're doing the work of freedom, right? We're doing this work.
Brenda,
Yes.
I just wanted to let you know, it says the presentation has yet to begin if people go to that link. So we could have people just write in the chat their definition.
Sure, that's fine. That's fine. I'm sorry. I should have activated it before I started. I'm so sorry.
Oh, it does work on texting, Valina says. So,
Oh, whatever is good for everyone. Just put in the chat. We could just see it in the chat.
thank you. Sorry.
The best laid plans. So again, I just want to set some, working definitions of anti-racism, anti-racist pedagogy. And here I'm sharing quotes from Bell Hooks out of Teaching for Transgression and Jarvis Givens from Fugitive Pedagogy, where he invokes the work of Carter G. Woodson, who, if some of you don't know, was the second Black person to receive a PhD from Harvard. He is the architect of Black History Month and was an advocate of anti-racist pedagogy in the early 19th century. And so when we plan our courses, I'm asking myself, I'm asking us as a group, are we pursuing anti-racist pedagogy? Are we pursuing anti-racism that's not performative? Are we pursuing remedies for our clients that are truly liberatory? And I want to say that all of these I'm just sharing with you reflections on my own work that I've engaged in with myself, that this is not, I'm asking myself these questions as I do my work. How can I be better at what I was doing prior to May 2020? What is it that I was doing then that could be enhanced now to pursue freedom on behalf of my clients? And this work, I think, is in line with fugitive pedagogy, with Teaching for Transgression, with pedagogy of the oppressed. And Givens reminds us that the long tradition of anti-racist teaching does not start with us. Obviously, it doesn't start with Ibram Kendi, and it was pioneered by Black educators such as Woodson, who argued that, and he argues that Black pedagogical practices have fundamentally been anti-racist since emancipation, right? So the work that we're doing, I just want to situate, when we say all the schools now, we're pursuing anti-racism. This is not necessarily anything for us to develop on our own, right? It's not, oh, let's just do whatever we want. Anti-racist pedagogy is in a long tradition that dates back to emancipation and pre-emancipation, when slaves were sneaking to read, to become literate. It is in a movement that predates all of us, right? And that if we're going to truly use this word, invoke this practice, we have to connect deeply with that history about freedom, that history that says I'm full person, I'm fully human. As we try to do this work, or else let's just call it something else. Like if we want to make up something else, we could do that too. But if we're going to be anti-racist in our practice, anti-racist in our pedagogy, we must tap into that Black liberatory tradition. And we'll want to steer away from performativeness. How do we do this? And especially, how do we do this if we are in the systems that we exist in the legal system, in academia, if we are, white, if we are upper middle class, even Black, how do we tap into this? And I suggest in the paper, and I want to suggest here, that the movement for Black lives is a guide for us, is a light and a beacon for us. We might mine it for how we go forward. Its platform critiques incrementalism. And so let's go back to the rights-based freedom that I showed the picture of earlier. And it calls for us to look to a liberation practice, a liberation praxis. And so in the same way that previous Black liberation movements have revolutionized legal academia before us, the movement for Black lives should provoke all of us today as teachers, as clinical teachers, especially to reevaluate, again, how we teach our students to practice. And as a clinical community, I think we have long kind of invoked this notion of client-centeredness, maybe to get at this point. But client-centeredness may not be enough. I'm going to suggest that we should be centering Blackness very directly. And this is the overarching point I want to make, if nothing else sticks, is that we can't be client-centered as we represent Black clients if we are not centering Blackness. And to center Blackness is to see and understand the world through the Black experience. Centering Blackness acknowledges the racial hierarchy that intentionally situates Black people at the bottom of society, and it provides opportunity to imagine how rules and structures would be reorganized and envision a world where we all thrive because the bottom is removed, that Black people no longer have to be the base. And our collective clinical scholarship, which is often, thinking about client-centeredness, we do so, I want to suggest, from the hypothetical perspective of a white male ableist heteronormative lawyer student. We're saying we're client-centered, but we center our students in our practice and our work. And I know there are good reasons for this. And I think we should talk about, the students are our client in many respects. They're paying. They pay for all of us. So I understand this desire. But we must, I think, sharpen our focus on the lived experience of Black, female, queer, disabled clinic clients, through their own firsthand narratives, like through talking to them, through understanding their lived experience. And how might we do this then, right? So I just want to get to the 4 points I raised that I share in the article. We might cite to Black women. And I want to just share a story here. I wasn't doing this. That's why I'm saying this is all self-reflective. I don't know what you do. Maybe you all don't even need this talk, and that's fine too. I'm just telling you what I need. I realized my own syllabus was racist. I was not cited. I do work for like 99.9% of my clients are Black women who live in public housing, subsidized housing, or otherwise housing insecure. But my syllabus was citing all white men. They are smart white men. There's nothing wrong with Matthew Desmond or Peter Moskowitz or Rothstein. Evicted, How to Kill a City, The Color of Law. Those are all really powerful seminal works. But so is the work of Sarah Broom in The Yellow House. So is the work of Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor in Race for Profit. And in the paper, I go through all the other women of color, Black women know more about housing, loss of housing than any demographic in this country. I should be citing to them. I wasn't even citing to myself. I write on this issue and I wasn't citing to myself. I don't have my own students downloading my own paper. That doesn't make sense. It's racism. And so we could cite to Black women. Black women have written on every subject, and we should mind their intellectual contributions generally as we do with white men. Substantively, I know I have to do better, and I've started to do better this semester. But if you're directing a clinic that represents Indigenous people, consider populating your syllabus with the intellectual production of Native people. If you're representing immigrants, please populate your syllabus with the narratives and the work of immigrants. The idea here is to trust oppressed people to prescribe their own emancipation, read what they have written on their own pain, read their own prescriptions, and then as an anti-racist clinic set out to be an ally in what they've already said they need. There's no need for us to be original here and innovate in this space. What we need to do, I think, is be better allies. So, the second thing I propose is that we could merge or map critical race theory onto our traditional clinical pedagogy. For some of us, that's harder than others because some of us need to learn critical race theory, right? To do that, we need to start with understanding critical race theory, understanding what it's not, what it is, reading Bell, reading Crenshaw, reading Harris. That's additional work that we have to do, but I want to urge you to do that work. It's worth it. I put the tenants here. This, I think, gives us language, right? If you don't have the language, these folks have already thought of language that helps to understand, and it's in practice. It's meant for the practice to help us understand theoretical frames that we can give our students to understand how race operates in the law. That's the point of critical race theory, to understand how race operates in the law. So we, again, don't have to make anything up here. We can look to our predecessors who have already done, and some of our contemporaries who have already done this work. And I mean, we could talk later. I want to leave time for talking, so I won't go into examples, but where I have, how I've used this, I can talk because I know sometimes people say, well, how do you do that, right? Well, how does that come up? And I've put some slides here to talk about how it arises for me in terms of seminar, lecture, rounds, and supervision. And I'm happy to come back to this. I know we'll all, thinking about the habits, and I use the habits a lot, have used the habits since I started teaching. Sue Bryant and Jinko Peters, very, very important work. And the habits nod to race, they do, but they're not always explicit. And I think CRT, in the moment we are in, and anti-racist pedagogy and Black Lives Matter, calls on us to be explicit in naming very directly in our classrooms the ways in which race shapes each of the relevant connections that are happening in our case. For example, how does the law see Black women who are housed in subsidized housing? Can we realistically overcome the welfare queen narrative? We need to name that, I want to suggest to you. So these are, again, this was, I can come back if anyone has questions about like how I've used this in rounds, how I've used this CRT, interest convergence in a supervision or case law, case example. And also in reflection, I've started, requiring, I used to have my students journal just about their cases, what was happening, but I've been more directive in their journaling along the order of teaching them in some ways CRT, trying to, I know we all have limits on our syllabi and how much we need to get done in a semester. So I've used the journal as a space to try to engage them in narrative and counter narrative and entrance convergence, and try to direct them into some of the literature that we might not have time for in our syllabus, realizing how much there is to cover, especially if you're in a one semester clinic. So here I have the final point in the paper is to align with Black folks organizing for the Afro future. And I want to lift up June Jordan's work in 1965 here on the left in Skyrise Harlem, where she said partial healing is not enough. A half century of despair, at that time, we've gone even beyond that now, requires exorcism, right? And so I think of this a lot now. Because we can get caught up in like, well, I saved your housing for a week. I've saved your housing for another month. We're getting through Christmas. Is that exorcism, right? Like this is not really liberatory. When you think of freedom for yourself, do you think I just need housing for another month? When I think about freedom for myself and my kids, do I feel like they only need housing through Christmas? This is not our best work. It's not my best work. And on the other picture, so two pictures of June Jordan's piece, Skyrise Harlem, where she tried to redesign Harlem for life instead of death. And she said Harlem was dying, its inhabitants were dying. And she drew this to billionaire Mark Laurie is designing a new city in the West called Tolosa. I don't know if you all know it. It is going to be 5 million people on 150,000 acres. And that's the picture that's there. Very similar to June Jordan's Skyrise Harlem, actually. And he's looking for the state that wants to house this new city. And I just want to ask, who's there? Every time I look at this picture, which I think is cool, and I like to stare at it, who's there? We can't see who's there really. Who's there? What are they doing? Who's free? Who's even invited? And I think it's our work to make sure that our Black clients are there, prospering in the future, objectively free. It's our work to join them. They want to be free. I'm telling you this. I know this for sure. I want to be free. We all want to be free, which was the point of saying, what is freedom to you? And so how might we help each other get there and make it so that Black Lives Matter is an idea, is not just an Afrofuturist assertion, right? Like Black Lives Matter right now is just not a truism. And so if we want to get to a future where it is a truism, and we want to participate in that, again, these are all choices we make. We don't have to participate. We can just participate in the status quo. But if we want to participate in it, I think we have to do more, and we have to be more explicit about what we're doing. And so allyship is not easy. I want to just name that. I'm not great at it. I saw Renee Hatcher come into the room, the virtual room. I give her a shout out in the paper because I failed where she succeeds, right? Brendan's in the room. These are people, we have colleagues doing this work. I'm no example here. I know I need to do better. I've tried multiple times and not done as best as I would want to be an ally. And there are reasons, right? Meetings are at night. Students are doing this, students are doing that. Because we're centering students, we shape what we're doing around their schedules instead of, thinking about the people we're trying to help and be an allyship with. And so I want to acknowledge this is not easy, and there are other people who are doing it better than I am. I just know we need to do it if we're saying we're going to engage in anti-racism work. So I just want to end here and say that this almost feels embarrassingly simple right now. You know how you throw something out in the world and you thought it was like really transformative when you're writing it, and then you realize this is like the base. This is the base. After I finished it, even if every one of us took this step, these 4 steps, right? There'd be so much more work to do. And I'm proposing this as a process to make conditions more conducive for the real evolution of our teaching and practice. But I worry that we're losing steam already, like coming on to spring 2022. I feel like I'm worried about where these efforts are going. Can we stay committed to anti-racism in the face of anticipated student pushback, institutional pushback, time constraints, opening back up? How do we balance teaching anti-racism with courses that are viewed to be more helpful to bar passage? Is there a tension between our teaching goals, for example, student desire for in-court experiences, and anti-racist practice goals, such as diverting clients from the legal system that we know is traumatic for them altogether? These are just a few of the things that I know are on all of our minds. And then the last steps, like what does this look like going forward? I want to start, I've been drawing more from Andrea Marie Brown and thinking about her work in emergent strategies. She says, trust the people and then move at the speed of trust. We may not be able to move at the speed of the semester, and we might have to get our institutions to be okay with that. I want to end with some of her words, which are that we're in an imagination battle. Trayvon Martin and Mike Brown and Renisha McBride and so many others are dead because in some white imagination, they were dangerous. And that imagination is so respected that those who kill based on an imagined racialized fear of Black people are rarely held accountable. That's the system that we are training lawyers in. And we have to imagine beyond those fears. If we're not, who will? If the clinicians aren't, who will? We have to ideate together, imagine, and conceive together. So I'm going to stop there. I look forward to hearing your feedback and to hopefully engaging in this work together.
Thank you so much. I think if folks have questions, they can, put them in the chat. We could also kind of have folks unmute if we don't have a queue.
Yeah, and I'm happy. I couldn't really see the time, so I'm happy to talk more about rounds or supervision or anything. I think Louise might have
I
questions.
see Louise raising her hand. You want to unmute? You're on mute still, if you can unmute yourself.
Okay. Well, thank you so much, Norrinda. I was so impressed with the article you did when we were in the same group in the this clinical scholarship. And so, of course, I wanted to hear you because I'm interested in this. So I'm interested in your change in attitude about what you can do in your clinic. And you describe it as being to do with the Black Lives Matter and that change. But what about the situation within your law school? Because I'm very interested in the barriers within legal education to make these kinds of changes in pedagogy and the way clinics are organized and so forth. That's what I'm thinking about now. So perhaps you can tell us, because I know at the time that you did the presentation on that paper, you were teaching critical race theory. And I questioned you about why in your paper you did not talk about critical race theory in connection with the housing discrimination that you were describing. And you gave some reasons, some of them related to your law school. So perhaps you can tell us why now you feel that you can do that. Do you feel emboldened? Do you feel supported? Do you feel there's still problems ahead for you? I'd like you to talk about that a little.
So I do feel supported at my law school. I do think in the paper describes some moments where we've had, these existential conversations about who we want to be as an institution. That's not without fault lines. If I said I was worried about my institution, then it was probably more generally, not any particular, incident that has arisen for me. I want to say that I just had Vince Warren and Mabray Staley in our class 2-3 weeks ago. And Vince is at CCR and Mabray is at Law for Black Lives. And I asked them about fear, right? Because I think our students are worried and think about fear. And what they said, again, both much closer to movements than I am, is when you're surrounded with people who put everything on the line, then the little bit of fear that we have, like what we have to give up, feels like so little to risk. And I think that's important. Most of you in this virtual room have white privilege. You don't really risk that much. I just want to be honest. Like, it's just not that much that you're risking. To be in an academic space and try to align with Black folks doing the work, it's not that risky. And even for a white person, no one even knows what we do in our clinic. No one even understands what we do in most of our clinics, honestly. Who's really checking? It's a boogeyman fear. I might be more at risk in academia than you all, but I'm still in academia and I feel I'm employable, right? Like, we are not on the front lines here. This is not, I just feel like I'm coming into this. And again, Louise, all of this is like every day, every week, I'm feeling different. It changes for me and I'm trying to grow.
Well, I think it's important for us to have these conversations because, after all, there is a significant national group that's allied critical race theory with a lot of really bad things. And I think that it's important that we support each other and also that we make the clinics supportive places. And and also, well, that's my feeling. My feeling is there's a lot of feeling that this is people are empowered, but I think it's important for those of us who are older and have seen the backlash and the really serious things that can happen to people who don't expect it. That while courage is important, we all have to anticipate and realize the past and also support each other. So
No,
I'm interested in working and setting up a project, and that I've been talking with people about it, where we figure out ways in which we can share our thoughts and support each other in an intellectual way within the clinics, because the clinics came out of another generation, client-centeredness and a whole different thing. And I think we have to think about more broadly, as you're talking about more broadly with your students, we as clinicians have to think more broadly about how the clinics can support each other and be more supportive within our law schools and together. And so that's just my comment on that. But I thought it was a great presentation, and I think that it's wonderful that you're doing that work.
Thank you. I mean, I want to just say everything that I ask the students to do, I don't say it's CRT. My particular students don't care, but it's not really about the label. What's controversial right now in the news is not CRT. If we're talking about elementary schools, CRT is concerned with the law and praxis of, like, you know, race as it relates to the law. These folks are talking about American history. They're just talking about straight and factual American history. They're calling it critical race theory, but there's just so few people really talking about critical race theory. They don't even know what critical race theory is. They're talking about American history that names plundering.
Brenda, I'm curious if you could go back to show us because we do have some time, and I personally, I'd be really interested to like go a little bit deeper into those examples. And then I know Renee also has a question, so I want to make sure you know, we get to that as well.
Yes. Okay. Let me try to share screen again. No. Sorry. So in rounds, this example that I'm giving is that we had a client who is Black disabled man, lives alone. He was trying to identify an apartment and went to a real estate broker, national real estate broker, to assist 3 times, no calls back. A partner that we work with frequently is a good partner. These are like, in the state doing fair housing work, brought this client to our attention. And also in the interim had done some testing work, found out that the real estate agent company was steering people, telling Blacks that, Black people that the deposits for apartments were 3 times the amount that they were telling white people, like really old school stuff, like $4,000 or $5,000 for a security, and then telling white folks it's $1,200. And then steering folks to different blocks, to certain neighborhoods. So we're looking at the case. In the course of interviewing the client, the students find out that the director of this nonprofit partner of ours had called the police on the client, potential client, saying out of fear that he might hurt himself. He said that he'd been on the phone with them. They were helping him find housing in the absence of the, they have an arm of their organization that was helping him find housing. And this fear for him, and he's really vulnerable, right? Like, he's not only just a Black man, he has mental and physical disabilities. He was institutionally committed for a week as a result of this, until he could manage to get himself out, and trying to navigate the situation with the police, begging them not to take him, on the phone with the housing partner, trying to tell them this is their misunderstanding. Please don't let the police take him. And so I used this to round. So we were thinking, we wanted to represent both of them initially. And then we explored ethically, if we wanted to take him, could we take them? How did he feel about these people called the police on you in the middle of, it's like, stop calling the police. It should be a common, for people who do fair housing work, should be a common, like, they should have a sticker, some bumper stickers in their office, stop calling the police. This shouldn't be anything we have to educate them through. And so like, I don't want to end this partnership, you know, so we're thinking, clinics are thinking about partnerships, and not ending these relationships, but we also have a client for whom we could understand if he's terribly upset with these folks. But then his case is stronger with the testing evidence than without it. And, you know, we rounded on that. After talking to him and getting his view about what he felt about this organization calling the police on him, and whether we could even continue to partner with an organization that would call the police on Black men that say, no, I'm fine. But no, I feel like you're not fine because I know better. And not call like a social worker or your caseworker. He has numerous other people you could call. Call a friend. Is there anyone else I could call to come meet you if I think you're in need? But I'm going to call the police. So we tried to figure out like what our role is vis-a-vis the organization, what our role was with vis-a-vis him, just in the course of educating my students, just in case some of them didn't know, you stop calling the police, right? Like I used it as a teaching moment, and again, trying to tie it to the work that's going on in the ground. We tried to just, but first hearing from him and what he wanted us to do, and outlining for him what the risk to his case might be of dropping them, but being willing to drop them, and also being willing to end the partnership. I can start my own fair housing center. I mean, we're not going to work with people who call the police on Black men. We're just not. So, you know, in supervision, we had Newark was, during the pandemic, they had very restrictive stay-at-home orders for certain areas, but Newark itself is 90% Black and brown. It grew to be the whole city where you couldn't, at a point, you couldn't come out even for essential services. And they would arrest you, give you fines or fees if you did. And we were trying to work with them through this and say, you can't do this, give them all this information about why they shouldn't and couldn't do this, but they were not budging. And so we thought to align entrance convergence as a tenet of CRT. And this is why I'm saying you don't have to, you know, I don't need to say CRT for my students to understand who has more power. The people of Newark are powerless. Who does the city care to protect? And we thought business owners, who are largely not Black, unfortunately, in Newark anymore. And if we could have the business owners say to the city, you're hurting our business by not letting the people out, might the city move and budge? And so thinking about power and race and what is a group of white people or non-Black people that might have more power for whom we could join and align and be able to advance our folks' interests by creating an allegiance that even if it wasn't public, if we supported the business owners with the city, could we create an opening that, you know, opened the city back up for our clients? And, you know, I use that as a supervision example, how I taught the students about entrance convergence and power and race dynamics, even in an all Black city with a Black mayor and a Black city council, how Black people are treated, and where you might need to find that 5% with the power that's not Black and try to align there, right? I mean, that's just, you know, 2 examples of how I've used it in rounds in supervision.
Thank you so much. Renee, I know you had a question. If you're still there, we'd love to hear it.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for your presentation. It was
Good to see you. Good to see
you
you.
too. So much of what you said certainly resonated with me. And I was thinking about, because this is something I've been thinking about, it's like, so in introducing these things to your clinic students, I think the tendency then is for students to feel very frustrated by the confines and the constraints and the problems with the law as a tool. And so I'm wondering, is it that you're focusing on the choices that we can make as lawyers within a certain system? Or if part of it, which is what I've been thinking about a lot, is really trying to get students to reimagine how the law might work and to at least start strategizing in terms of how we make small gains in some of the legal frameworks. Right?
Yeah. I thank you for that question. And I try to do both, right? So I'm in a small state where these folks are going to run it. New Jersey hires Rutgers, New Jersey, everything hires Rutgers students. There's only 2 law schools in town. There's one, it's Rutgers and there's Seton Hall. And by in town, I mean the whole state. Like that's the game. So I always tell them, you're running this. You're going to be counsel. You're going to be in Trenton. You're going to be governor. And they literally are. It doesn't have to be this way. None of this has to be this way. All of this is just choice. All of these are choices that are being made that minimize the humanity of Black people. Do you choose that? And I feel like it's my goal and my obligation and duty as their professor to make them understand that this may be, and this is why I end with the Afrofuture, this may be what we're dealing with right now, but it doesn't have to be into perpetuity. And so we need to do both. Like, of course, we have to go, I don't mean to minimize what 1 more week of housing is for this person, but we could have a universal right to housing. And all it takes, we just saw it. We just gave all this emergency rental assistance money to make it possible, irrespective of your record, irrespective of, how many kids you have, whatever. Like, just make it so that everyone can have housing. Other countries do it. We can do it. And so I try to expose them to that while we're going in the landlord tenant and saying, like, we're going to actually not do this here today, right? We're going to work in the system today. But I just try to nudge their imagination. And I think I have an easier job because they actually will be running the state shortly, to say all of this is someone's choice. And you could choose something different if you know better. And one way we can do it, I just hired trying to build a practicum with organizers. Like, I can't do this work. I don't have an organizer's training. I was trained in the Department of Justice, opposite of what we need. Opposite of what we need, right? So I can't do it all. I'm like, I know that. The law schools allowed me to hire folks that know better to come train the students to say, like, let's go responsibly on the ground and figure out what the people need. And like, let's try to advocate that we do that. So I just feel like we got to do both, right? Like, do what we have to do in the system we're in today, and then try to help them envision a better system for tomorrow. Yeah, Renee saying, can the U.S. legal system hold the freedom dreams of Black movements? No, right? I don't, no. But that's why I just want to say, we had a moment, we had an opportunity. Our students, I mean, maybe not in all of our institutions, but in some of them are ahead of us right now in understanding what needs to be done. What they don't need is for us to say what can't be done, because this is the system that we're in. And so I feel like at least if we could stop saying that, what can't be done, this is how it works. Because I think they better understand some of what's happening than we do. I hope some of this is like helpful in jogging your minds. Again, no answers, just questions, all questions.
I can tell that it is. I know it is for me, and I see kind of reactions in the group as well. We're so grateful for this. I think there's time for one last question.
One more question. There's so many questions.
Well, if we don't have a last question, I know Allison and I are just, oh, Julia, thank you so much. We'll take one last question and then we can close it out.
Hey, Norrinda, thanks again also for this for the presentation. I had to hop off on a call in like the middle of it, so I missed a chunk. But I did have a question to the extent that you didn't talk about this. The Cite Black Women piece was really resonated with me, and I was just wondering if you could, if you had any like strategies, like things that people could use in terms of how you actually sort of went about sort of that process. Was there sort of like a, let me go look at pieces that, aren't sort of in Westlaw, or did you sort of set like a number? Did you kind of allocate a certain amount of time as you were putting together your syllabus? Like any like helpful nuts and bolts tips you could give to folks who are trying to do that?
That's a great question. And I wish it was that it was more organic, right? Because I just came to a realization that I was making a mistake. And so I also got a grant from the chancellor to buy a lot of books. And it gave me a good opportunity to just go crazy, right? So I think there's that, right? And I bought old stuff and new stuff. Like I realized that though I was well educated in college, I didn't take advantage of all the education that I had access to. So I needed to go back and reread some of the stuff that I had exposure to in undergrad, but just wasn't in the right frame of mind to let it sit with me. So I bought, Davis and Hooks, right? But again, and I've gone outside of law, sociology, critical geography, those that are just teaching undergrad courses. I've just tried to be expansive, and one thing leads to another, and someone cites something else and you haven't read it and you're like, let me just like click on that and get it. And so it's just been organic. Thank you.
All right, everyone, I think we're going to close it out. But again, a huge thank you to Norrinda Hayat today for sharing with us this wonderful presentation. I think all of us are so excited about reading this paper, and we will certainly share within our own networks so that folks can have that once it is live, as well as we will make this presentation recording available to everyone on the CLEA website, and we will let everyone know when that is up. I want to encourage you all to look forward toward our December 7th presentation, which will feature Alexi Freeman from Denver, who will discuss teaching justice through externships and equity through externships. Thank you again, everybody, for attending. Norrinda, I'm going to be thinking about this presentation for a long time and carrying it into future work and semesters. So thank you. And best wishes closing out the semester to everyone. We will see you in December.
Thank you. I wanted to put just two quick links in the chat for some work. I found a piece on performative anti-racist curriculum in law in medical school that I thought was helpful, and I'm putting in the chat. And this piece on fugitive pedagogy and Carter G. Woodson's work that might be helpful. I'm putting in the chat. Have a great end of the semester, everyone.